And good evening, everybody. I'm Aaron Gilchrist in for Tom Llamas tonight. We begin Top Story with that tropical storm warning now in effect for millions of Americans. The first named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, potentially just hours away from making landfall. That system bringing damaging winds and heavy rain from Cuba up through the Florida Keys. Roads flooded, creating treacherous driving conditions. Now, residents across South Florida packing sandbags, bracing for flash flooding and for potential tornadoes. That storm is gaining strength as it heads towards Miami. Bill Cairns is standing by to time it all out for us. First, let's get right to NBC South Florida's Jamie Garola, who leads us off from Marathon.
Throughout the day Friday, heavy winds and random bouts of rain. The Keys already feeling the effects of the first tropical system this hurricane season. It's churning in the Gulf and creeping toward the Florida coast, possibly becoming a tropical storm by landfall.
We're cleaning out the drains. We've been doing that for the last few days, of course. I mean, in time to start the hurricane season, we clean out the drains really well. We're constantly cleaning. We know the low-lying areas. We tell folks if you don't feel comfortable, move your cars.
The Keys are conditioned to hurricane season, but people who visit aren't, like this family from Europe.
We've been in Miami. It was super hot, and now we hope we will enjoy some sunny weather on beaches here in Key West.
I hate to tell you, that's not going to happen between now and Saturday.
That's too bad.
Emergency officials in Monroe County warn of flooding and 4 to 8 inches of heavy rainfall, as much as 12 inches in other areas. No evacuations have been ordered and no shelters are opening. But residents and tourists are being advised to stay off the road.
And that's going to cause a lot of street flooding in areas that are prone to rainfall flooding here in the Keys, such as in Old Town Key West and also some portions of neighborhoods further up the Keys, including in Key Largo.
The timing of the storm so early, raising eyebrows and speculation about what this means for the rest of the season.
It might be like less actually, since starting early, so it might end early. No. Thing.
What do you think?
I think it's Florida, so whatever happens, happens. It's a bipolar state.
Just because we have one this early doesn't mean that the rest of June and July is necessarily going to be busy. But if anything, it's a good time to practice and review our preparedness plans and to make sure we are ready for the main season, August, September, and early October.
And NBC6 South Florida reporter Jamie Garola joins us now from Marathon, Florida. So, Jamie, you've been reporting on this tropical system all day there. How are conditions out there right now?
Well, you know, right now it is raining, as you can see, and the rain just picks up hour by hour. So does the wind. And the weather is expected to deteriorate throughout the evening, beginning more so at 8 o'clock, and will continue to hammer the area throughout the evening. Of course, people who live here and the people who are visiting here are being told to go ahead and stay indoors. They are supposed to do that as of 5 o'clock this evening.
Our thanks to Jamie Garola there in Florida. Let's get a little more detail now on this storm and when it might make landfall. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is here. So, Bill, what do we need to know?
This is a water concern. Number one cause of damage and deaths in all tropical systems is water, and usually storm surge and the heavy rainfall. We're not worried about storm surge with this one, but the heavy rainfall could make huge issues. They're worried about the flood control systems being overwhelmed in South Florida. That means canals overflowing and flooding. That means water getting into homes. That means evacuations and water rescues are possible in the next 24 hours. Well out ahead of the storm, we have a lot of torrential tropical rains already over the state. Areas like Naples already 4 inches of rain. So we're not concerned with the winds. We're not going to get a lot of wind damage. It does look like this is a rainfall forecast. So how long will that heavy rain threat exist? Well, the storm will cross almost over the top of Lake Okeechobee about Saturday afternoon. It should be exiting by Saturday night. And as soon as the storm moves past, the rainfall will end. We will see some gusty winds, minor storm surge, but by far the biggest concern is going to be rain. So how's the timing of it? All the bright reds on this map, that's tropical downpours. That's possibility of 1 to 3 inches of rainfall an hour. Look at Saturday morning between Fort Myers and Miami. That's the worst of it. Notice I-4 corridor. You're not too bad with this storm. As we watch the afternoon go by, there is a storm ending by about 8 p.m. Everyone is done tomorrow. So it's now, tonight, and then early tomorrow morning. That's when the worst of the impacts will be in the area. How much rain? South Florida has sandy soil. It's really good at soaking it up, unlike other areas of the country. But even a foot of rain in those areas is too much, and it can overwhelm the area areas that we have roadways. We're talking about the possibility of canals and also any parking lots and a foot of rain. We've already had 4 inches. That would be 8 additional inches. And if that wasn't enough to worry about, with any landfalling tropical system, we always have the potential for tornadoes. That threat will exist later tonight and tomorrow. That includes Fort Lauderdale to Miami to Homestead, down through the Keys, and a little portion there of the Everglades. So, Aaron, this isn't a big, huge storm. We're not going to have a big landfall with the winds gusting and reporters blowing around on the beaches. This will be all about what happens with the heavy rain tonight into tomorrow.
All right, we appreciate the warning. Meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, thanks. New details on that elementary school shooting in Uvalde. A Texas state senator now saying the police chief leading the response did not have his police radio on him, and he was unaware of the 911 calls coming from inside the school. This as more families gather to bury their young victims. Morgan Chesky is in Uvalde tonight.
Tonight, new information about the devastating communication breakdown at Robb Elementary.
We still don't have all of the answers.
State Senator Roland Gutierrez telling NBC News that according to a law enforcement official close to the investigation, the school's police chief, Peter Navarro, did not have his radio with him during the shooting, though that has not publicly been confirmed.
Do people here not even know who to believe anymore?
They're very angry here in Uvalde. They're very angry at their police, at the troopers, at everybody.
Over the last 10 days, there have been mixed messages and shifting stories. DPS initially said the gunman was engaged by a school resource officer, who was later found to have not even been on campus. And investigators first said the gunman got into the school through a door propped open by a teacher. We've now learned she did, in fact, close that door.
They're supposed to be locked. She expected it was locked. She thought it was locked, right, because that's why she slammed the door.
Next week, as Congress negotiates gun legislation, survivors from Buffalo and Uvalde, including the 11-year-old who covered herself in blood and played dead, will testify before the House Oversight Committee.
No 86-year-old should fear for her safety to go to the grocery store. No 9-year-old should be afraid to go to school. And no 18-year-old should be able to buy a weapon of war.
New York is already taking action. The state legislature passed a bill raising the age to buy a semi-automatic rifle from 18 to 21. Back in Uvalde, 9-year-old Jacqueline Cazares was laid to rest. And there was a joint service for 10-year-old cousins Jace Levanzo and Jayla Silguero. Their uncle saying, "Fly high, my beautiful angels." Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Uvalde.
Now, in the wake of the Uvalde massacre, school districts are looking for solutions, any solution to fight the gun violence epidemic in this country. Tonight, we're in Dallas, where a new program is teaching kids how to recognize warning signs and get troubled students the help they need. NBC's Shaq Brewster has the story.
What's the second step? Inside this Dallas middle school, today's lesson is about preventing school tragedies. We will be discussing topics and images around bullying, violence, suicide, and self-harm. The program is called Say Something. It's run by Sandy Hook Promise, a group formed after the 2012 shooting in Connecticut at Sandy Hook Elementary School that took 26 lives. The free class teaches students how to recognize warning signs, like peers posting threatening messages online, bragging about guns, or expressing suicidal thoughts. Schools and the threats they face have changed dramatically. The goal here is to empower students to quickly flag them. Students are on the front lines. They see things through social media, through conversations with their peers. Using real-life examples, he posted this: "Don't come to school tomorrow if you want to live." More than 3 million students nationwide have been trained to alert a trusted person or to submit an anonymous tip using the secure app.
They might not act immediately. It's because that they don't want to be called a snitch.
You beat me to the punch. The program emphasizing it's not about snitching, but getting help to those who need it.
You didn't feel safe after Uvalde. After going through this class, what are you thinking?
After going through this class, I feel super safe.
Anything can happen. Anything. You should just always keep an open eye out for things.
Kids feeling responsible for their own protection.
Aaron, I also spoke to the principal of this school who was sitting in on that training, and she said this training helps her sleep better at night. You really get the sense this is not just about the students, but it's about starting those conversations between students and teachers and instructors, helping everyone understand how they can act when there are obvious warning signs that are there. Aaron?
Another major headline tonight. Former Trump advisor Peter Navarro arrested today. He was indicted for defying a subpoena from the House committee that's looking into the Capitol riot. He is the second former advisor to be charged with criminal contempt, and he's vowing to fight those charges. NBC's Ali Vitale has the latest.
Tonight, federal prosecutors charging Peter Navarro, a former trade advisor in the Trump administration, on 2 counts of contempt of Congress for snubbing the January 6th House committee, denying them documents and a deposition. The first indictment of someone who served in the Trump White House during the January 6th attack. Late today, Navarro slamming the move and citing executive privilege.
What that kangaroo committee is doing right now is investigating for punitive purposes. Their clear mission is to prevent Donald John Trump from running for president in 2024.
Navarro did not self-surrender before today's hearing. He says he was not given the chance and was arrested while boarding a plane. He faces up to a year in jail on each charge. The move from DOJ comes after criticism from Democrats that Attorney General Merrick Garland should act more quickly on congressional contempt referrals.
Attorney General Garland, do your job so that we can do ours.
Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon has also been charged with contempt of Congress, which he's called politically motivated. Today, Democrat Adam Schiff praising DOJ's action, saying prosecution of those who refuse to comply with a lawful subpoena is vital to ensuring congressional oversight has teeth. The flurry of legal activity coming days before the committee kicks off high-profile public hearings. The first one set for Thursday. Aaron?
Ali Vitale on the Hill, thank you. Next to a battle between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the Special Olympics, that organization pulling its vaccine mandate for this weekend's games in Orlando after DeSantis threatened a $27.5 million fine. NBC's Sam Brock has more.
Tonight, controversy in Florida, with Governor Ron DeSantis threatening the Special Olympics with a $27 million fine over their vaccine mandate.
To go after Special Olympians who all they wanted to do is compete was not consistent with Florida law, and it's not the right thing to do. Let them compete.
The backlash swift. One tweet noting, what type of person do you have to be to bully the Special Olympics? Others voicing support, one calling the governor an American hero. Yesterday, the Special Olympics giving in, lifting the requirement, saying athletes who were unable to participate due to the prior vaccine requirement now have the option to attend. DeSantis also continuing to take aim at the transgender community, his Surgeon General sending a letter to the medical board asking for a, quote, new standard of care for transgender youth. Specifically saying, I recommend it against certain pharmaceutical, non-pharmaceutical, and surgical treatments for gender dysphoria. Calling the research extraordinarily weak. Those treatments endorsed by both the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Children aren't having surgery. We are talking about things like puberty blockers. And so to suggest that transgender kids are having irreversible medical care is simply false.
The state's Surgeon General didn't respond to NBC News' request for comment. DeSantis' health department is also trying to block Medicaid coverage to transgender Floridians of all ages who want puberty blockers, hormone therapies, or gender-affirming surgery. With the backlash over the Parental Rights in Education bill, also known as Don't Say Gay by critics, and a corporate showdown with Disney still fresh, the culture wars in Florida just received more fuel. Sam Brock, NBC News, Miami.
We turn to the economy now, and more evidence tonight that there are far more job openings than employees to fill them, despite 40-year high inflation. Employers adding almost 400,000 jobs in May as unemployment remains at 3.6%. NBC's Tom Costello has more on the inflation challenge.
Today's jobs report provides both good and bad news as the country tries to rein in 8% inflation. Employers added 390,000 jobs in May, many more than expected. Most of the jobs in leisure and hospitality, as Americans keep spending and traveling. The unemployment rate still hovering near 50-year lows. Wages up 5.2% from a year ago, less than in recent months. But Americans aren't seeing that extra cash since it's costing so much more to buy food and gas. Regular unleaded hit a new record high today, $4.76 a gallon.
I know that even with today's good news, a lot of Americans remain anxious.
In Ely, Iowa, Kurt Chamaland owns T&K Roofing and Sheet Metal. Business is strong, but raw material prices are skyrocketing, and he can't find enough young employees willing to work, even with a 40% wage increase.
Given the choice between working outside in the heat and the cold versus working inside, sometimes it's hard to get people to take on that challenge.
Meanwhile, young, tech-savvy workers remain in high demand. Madison Doss earned a bachelor's degree at 18. Now at 21, she just changed project management jobs, her salary jumping from $40,000 to $65,000 a year.
I feel highly in demand because of my inherent skill set that I have from growing up in the technical generation.
The hot jobs market comes as company staffing levels still haven't returned to pre-pandemic numbers.
How companies grow is by adding more workers and making those workers more productive. And so they're trying to do both.
Tom joins us now. You know, Tom, while all of this was going on today, Wall Street actually lost more ground. The Dow Jones down 348 points, the S&P down 68. Why did the markets move lower on what should have been some good economic news?
Yeah, because you know what's good news on Main Street isn't always good news for Wall Street. And Wall Street is worried that as companies continue hiring and raising wages, that feeds inflation, and the Fed will have to continue aggressively raising rates to tame inflation. Oil prices keep going up. Today, Tesla CEO Elon Musk said he has a super bad feeling about the economy. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said something similar this week. So there's real concern that this economy is headed for trouble.
Tom Costello in Washington. Tom, thanks. Heading overseas now, Queen Elizabeth now set to miss a second event celebrating her Platinum Jubilee. It's one of her favorites, too. Also today, her grandson, Prince Harry, and his wife, Meghan, making their first public appearance at a royal event in more than 2 years. NBC's Kelly Kobiella is in London.
Tonight, another cancellation. Queen Elizabeth II will miss one of her favorite events Saturday, horse racing at the Epsom Derby, watching instead from Windsor Castle. It comes after the 96-year-old monarch bowed out of today's church service in her honor at St. Paul's Cathedral, the palace said due to the journey and activity required, like the walk up those imposing steps and down the long cathedral aisle. The palace says the Queen experienced discomfort yesterday after her appearances on the famous balcony. The Queen is the head of the Church of England. Her faith is very important to her. Missing this service would not have been an easy decision. The royal family carried on without their monarch. Cheers for Prince William and Kate, but a mixed reception from the crowd for Prince Harry and Meghan, who were not included in some of the biggest moments with the Queen yesterday. Today, the couple seated across the aisle from Harry's brother and father, every detail closely choreographed. And late today, the palace said not to expect the Queen at tomorrow's Jubilee concert either. All indications are she'll spend the day out of the public eye.
Kelly Kobiella in London for us tonight. And still ahead this evening, Manhunt over. A 3-week-long search for an escaped inmate ending in a shootout with police. The horrific crime that led police officers to the killer. Plus, the motorcyclist rear-ended and sent flying onto the hood of a car. What he says saved his life. And an NBC News investigation tonight. The real estate industry booming during the pandemic, but many agencies took out loans that were forgiven. Do they plan to give any of that money back? Stay with us. Now back on Top Story, the manhunt for an escaped Texas inmate coming to an end. Gonzalo Lopez fatally shot by police after being on the run for nearly 3 weeks. NBC's Stephen Romo has more on the grim discovery that helped track him down.
Tonight, a manhunt capturing the attention of Texas law enforcement for nearly 3 weeks now is finally over, but not without tragedy. Officials say escaped inmate Gonzalo Lopez tracked down and killed in a shootout by police only after a gruesome discovery.
While investigating some leads that were inside the search perimeter, law enforcement agencies received a call from a concerned individual who had not heard from their relatives.
1 adult and 4 minors found dead in the Centerville, Texas home in the same area Lopez escaped back on May 12th.
The family is not local. They are from the Houston area. And again, this was not a primary residence. This was a weekend residence.
Authorities have not released their names or ages, but a statement by the Tomball Independent School District revealed the 4 children attended school there and were with their grandfather at the time. While Lopez is the prime suspect, authorities haven't officially tied him to those homicides. Police then on the lookout for this vehicle, a 1999 Chevy Silverado that they say Lopez stole from the property. A few hours later, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice says they spotted him in Jordanton, Texas, over 250 miles away from where he'd stolen that truck.
They trailed Gonzalo, and then ultimately the tires were spiked on that vehicle. After a short chase and a crash, Gonzalo Lopez exited the Chevy Silverado with a firearm and engaged law enforcement officers who engaged back and ultimately killed Lopez.
Before escaping, Lopez had been serving a life sentence for capital murder and attempted capital murder. The 46-year-old had ties with the Mexican mafia, which had helped him escape capture in the past after being arrested on an unrelated charge. This is the largest manhunt in Texas in nearly 20 years, with at least 7 agencies involved and more than 300 law enforcement officers searching on foot, horseback, and helicopter. But questions still remain about how this happened in the first place and why so many innocent lives are now lost.
Anytime that you have someone that escapes from custody, that is absolutely something that we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how that happened.
Stephen Romo, NBC News.
Now to some housing issues where prices are at record highs now. New data this week showing they're up more than 20% since last year. But realtors are reporting millions in annual sales in 2020. In some cases, they also took out big loans from the federal government and had them forgiven. The NBC News investigative unit crunched the numbers, and Guad Venegas has this exclusive report.
One of the biggest government relief programs in history, the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP loan program, was meant to be a lifeline for small businesses through a dark period of the pandemic.
From coast to coast, empty streets, businesses closed.
As dire as things looked in March and April of 2020, many entities ended up faring well through COVID. Some of them benefited from the program and got loans forgiven even after their business bounced back. An NBC News analysis of data from the government's Pandemic Response Accountability Committee found that the federal government authorized more than 300,000 PPP loans to real estate entities claiming just one employee. That adds up to $3.9 billion in loans backed by the U.S. Small Business Administration. Yet, unlike other industries like tourism and hospitality, which suffered during the pandemic, real estate boomed.
Bidding wars are on the rise. 41% of listings sparked bidding wars.
Existing home sales in June jumped 20.7%. That is the largest one-month jump ever since the realtors began recording in 1968.
Between April of 2020 and January of 2021, existing home sales jumped more than 50%. Now, the price of homes are at least 38% higher than in January of 2020. In Santa Barbara, real estate agent Gary Goldberg was involved in the sales of luxury homes equaling more than $27 million in 2020. In 2021, jumping to $82 million, according to a history of listings on Zillow. Even estimating a conservative commission, that could still mean potentially 7 figures in earnings over the 2 years. Yet public records show Goldberg's business also received $95,000 in PPP loans, which were forgiven in 2021. We reached out to ask him about it, but he declined to comment. There's no indication he did anything illegal. He's also not alone. In West Los Angeles, Enzo Ricciardelli was the agent in $12.2 million of home sales in 2020 per his Zillow history, and his business also received more than a $145,000 loan from the Paycheck Protection Program, forgiven in 2021. Efforts to reach him were unsuccessful. NBC News reached out to a dozen agents with strong 2020 sales and whose businesses obtained PPP loans in excess of $90,000 that were wholly or partially forgiven by the federal government. None agreed to do an on-camera interview. Aaron Stackley with the National Association of Realtors defended those who asked for PPP loan forgiveness in her industry.
They had open houses canceled because obviously people didn't want people traipsing through their homes. If they received the loans in good faith and if they followed the program's rules, then that is what the SBA and Congress intended to happen.
The loans were made with the understanding that they'd be forgiven if the recipient met certain criteria, like spending 60% of it on payroll. But not everybody was able to get assistance. Back in Los Angeles, we visited an address listed on one realtor's loan. A new business had moved in. The manager there telling us what it was like to get denied.
In the beginning of the pandemic, it was very hard because everything was shutting down and closing and not available, and it was pretty tough. Yeah. Now we're barely trying to get our heads above the water now. The banks were also very kind of iffy. They were saying we are not qualifying.
Yet for real estate entities, forgivable loans were given back to realtors in many booming markets. $3.6 million to real estate entities in Beverly Hills, $4.3 million in El Paso, Texas, and $14.9 million in Charlotte, North Carolina. Out of the realtors we tried to contact, one did say she plans to return the money. Phyllis Paytick, a real estate agent in Austin, Texas, got an $83,300 loan. She says she'll pay hers back, citing her good business through the pandemic.
So Guad Venegas joins us now. And Guad, I guess I understand a business asking for forgiveness. If you can ask, why not ask? But from the government's perspective, why did the federal government forgive all these loans, even for businesses that did well through the pandemic?
That's a big part of the question, Aaron. We spoke to the Small Business Administration about this, and a senior SBA official told NBC News that multiple pieces of legislation dictated the terms of the loan program, and they were, quote, extremely liberal and extremely generous when it came to the loan forgiveness. Essentially, that's how the program was designed. But as the country now questions if the pandemic relief was too big with inflation where it is, we thought we would highlight how there were lots of businesses that, as you saw, got relief that actually did pretty well these last 2 years. Aaron?
All right, Guad Venegas with us tonight. Guad, we appreciate it. Thank you. Well, when we come back, a man arrested outside the U.S. Capitol with body armor and high-capacity magazines. What we're just learning about the suspect, who authorities say is a former New York City cop. And back now with Top Stories news feed and the arrest of a retired NYPD officer outside the U.S. Capitol. Capitol Police say 53-year-old Jerome Philippe was found with a BB gun, body armor, high-capacity magazines, and other ammunition. He also had a fake badge and claimed to be an Interpol investigator. A senior law enforcement official told NBC News Philippe left the force in 2018 while the department had charges pending against him. To Pennsylvania now, where Dr. Mehmet Oz has won the Republican primary for Senate. The Trump-backed TV star winning the GOP nomination over businessman David McCormick by a razor-thin margin. McCormick announcing today he called Oz to concede while the vote was still being recounted. Oz will face Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman in the general election this November. A motorcyclist lucky to be alive after a shocking crash caught on camera. Take a look here, a GoPro camera capturing the moment a car rammed into the back of the motorcycle. The rider flying into the car's windshield and then onto the center lane. That crash happening during rush hour on a highway near Dallas. The man has a few broken bones, but he credits his safety gear with saving his life. And a climate warning tonight. Earth's carbon dioxide levels hit a record high in May. New data from NOAA showing a 50% increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere compared to the pre-industrial average in the late 19th century. Scientists say the rapidly warming planet is leading to more frequent and extreme heat waves, hurricanes, and wildfires. Now to the Americas as hurricane season kicks off and debates on the Hill about Puerto Rico's political status continue. Many Puerto Ricans are just trying to keep the lights on. Isa Gutierrez was on the island speaking to to the president of an energy company there and to Puerto Ricans impacted.
In Puerto Rico, frustration grows over power outages locals say are constant.
En los últimos tiempos hemos tenido mucho problema con la luz. hay constantes apagones.
No compra todo el tiempo, que la compra que hacemos tiene que durarnos mucho tiempo y pues cuando se va la luz, mucha comida se daña y pues es un desperdicio.
In addition to spoiling food and causing water supply issues, the blackouts often damage appliances and other home electronics. Businesses now suing the private company that runs part of the island's electric grid after a fire broke out at a main power station in April, leaving more than 1 million people in a blackout. In the class action lawsuit, 4 corporations in charge of managing food chains like Wendy's and Olive Garden on the island are seeking $310 million in damages to cover losses caused by the blackout.
Every large and small piece of electrical apparatus that it takes to build an electric system or maintain an electric system is located in this warehouse.
Luma Energy is a private American-Canadian company that took over transmission and distribution from Puerto Rico's Electric Power Authority last year. Locals say electric bills have gone up while outages continue.
Aumentan la luz. Es un relajo lo que tienen con nosotros y lamentablemente menos dinero para nosotros y más para ellos.
What would you say to people who say it's worse? It's worse now, it's worse since Maria, and it's worse since Luma took over.
The system itself is fragile. It is absolutely fragile.
Last month, I traveled to Puerto Rico and sat down with the company's president, Wayne Stensby.
Our own reliability metrics would show that it's getting better. The outages are actually shorter. There are actually fewer outages. Customers are indeed paying more for electricity in Puerto Rico than they were a year ago. And that is a direct connection with the price of fuel. I do have a great degree of empathy for our customers who are, often will say, well, you've been at it 11 months, why isn't it all fixed? And the truth is, it took decades for it to end up in the state it's in, and it's going to take us a few years to get it back to a system that is what we might expect in other parts of the world.
But for people who are concerned about today, tomorrow, the next day, next week, and are worried that they're not going to be able to continue to run their businesses, they're not going to be able to feed their families because of these outages, what would you say to them?
We are putting our hearts and minds into this, and it is getting better.
In a statement to NBC News, Luma Energy said they cannot comment on any pending litigation regarding the April 6 outage, but that, quote, an investigation is underway to understand how such large outages have occurred in the past and to prevent it from happening in the future. For small business owners like Rosa Andújar, every minute of a blackout hurts.
Imagínate, si hay 2 o 3 días sin luz, pues ya perdemos la mercancía.
Meanwhile, as the 5-year anniversary of Hurricane Maria approaches, Puerto Ricans brace themselves for another hurricane season that can set them back farther. If there's major destruction, recovery could take years.
Yo creo que en un próximo desastre natural de esa categoría vamos a tardar mucho más.
Isa Gutierrez, NBC News.
Well, if it's Friday night, you know it's Dateline. Tonight, the story of a college student who was murdered while on spring break. But the investigation into her inner circle revealed a sinister betrayal.
A.J. Hetzel had been missing for over 24 hours. Text messages from her cell phone indicated she was stressed out, overwhelmed, and in need of some time alone. But to Detective Benjamin, none of it made sense. Had anyone seen her?
Nobody'd seen her.
Nothing?
No.
Did you think that maybe she ran away?
Initially, that was one of the possible theories.
But the more people Benjamin talked to, the more he learned that simply wasn't A.J.
Nobody thought she had just ran away.
As for those text messages, there was something odd about them, too.
1, she refused to say where she was or who she was with. 2, she was using language that was inconsistent with how she would normally send text messages. I became more and more concerned that she was in danger. It was looking more and more like an abduction.
But who would want to kidnap A.J.?
And Dateline's Andrea Canning joins us now. So, Andrea, what's in the name, right? Without giving too much away here, why is this episode called The Jacket?
Aaron, the jacket will become a critical clue, a critical piece of evidence in this case. Our victim's jacket is located in a house, and that discovery of that jacket leads police down a rabbit hole, and will eventually actually solve the case.
Just so many interesting angles to this. This was an average college student we were talking about here who just up and vanished. How did police begin to narrow down what happened to her?
Well, really, in these cases, when the police, they enter the house and there's not a whole lot to go on. So the one thing they can do, especially with a younger person, is really start to talk to their inner circle, talk to their friends. What was going on in that person's life? Who were they seeing? And in this case, our victim, who was a young college student, had no shortage of friends, and the friends would become the investigation. What did they know? What could they tell the police? And that really becomes a very, very big part of the story.
So speaking of friends, I know that you spoke to AJ's stepfather and two close friends for this episode of Dateline. What did you learn about the kind of person she was?
AJ, she kind of had a rough life a little bit because her mom, she had different father figures in her life. But she always seemed to persevere, and she always seemed to not let go of her goals in life. She was a softball player. She had big plans at college. She had a lot of friends, and she also had sisters that she was a big sister to, and so she was the leader. And it really came across when she went missing just how much people cared about her and loved her, because the searches for her just were huge. And it was like the whole city came out really to find her. She made such an impact on so many people.
And you can catch that all-new episode of Dateline tonight at 10 Eastern on NBC. And still to come here tonight, deadly derailment. A train in Germany flying off the rails. How first responders rescued passengers trapped inside. That's next. And we're back now with Top Stories Global Watch. We begin with a deadly train derailment in Germany. Officials say part of the Munich-bound train came off the tracks in Bavaria. First responders pulling passengers out of windows there to safety. At least 4 people are dead. Dozens are injured. Authorities believe many students were on that train. The cause is under investigation. Today marks 100 days since Russia invaded Ukraine, but the end of that war is nowhere in sight. Russian forces are advancing east and getting closer to taking control of the Luhansk region. The UN says the civilian death toll has surpassed 4,000. Ukraine's President Zelensky undefeated, though, saying today, quote, "Victory will be ours." And parts of Shanghai going back into lockdown just one day after COVID restrictions were lifted. We're talking about 4 neighborhoods in particular here after 7 new COVID cases. Authorities had just ended a 2-month citywide lockdown on Wednesday. The walkback angering some residents there who are becoming increasingly frustrated with China's strict zero COVID policy. For Tom Llamas, I'm Aaron Gilchrist in New York. Stay right there. More news is on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.